Ardon, really nice to talk to you. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the Cross Street Music Festival and also some of your own work. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Funnily enough, I'm kind of like in this really transformative, crazy change in my life.
Yeah.
But it's really freeing and exciting. So I feel like I'm the happiest I've been for a very long time.
Can I ask you what's going on? What's changing?
Yeah, so I've had a business for the last 4 years, which has been incredible, and I've really enjoyed it. And then it got up to the end of last year, and there's just been a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. Obviously, like economy, all of those kind of things have had a really big impact. And I kind of didn't realize the weight that I was kind of carrying. Um, and then this year after New Year's, I was like, some things need to change. I felt a change. I didn't know what that kind of was. And then I realized obviously the business was holding me back. So I decided to close my business. I'm leaving my house on my birthday. I'm turning 33. I'm calling it 33. I'm freeing myself of all responsibilities to move into my van to go and do some festivals that I'm performing at. And solely putting like 110% of my effort and time into music because there's nothing else that I want to be doing. So big changes, a lot, but at the same time, it's really exciting. I've just got to give it a go and see what happens.
Well, sometimes, in life, when you do that, when you step out into the unknown, it's not completely unknown because you've been a performer for a while, but when you
Yeah.
step out out of your comfort zone, then that can be actually, as you say, freeing, but also lots of opportunities can happen. So yeah, good place to be.
Yeah, and being in my comfort zone is something that scares me. So weirdly enough, I operate really nicely throwing myself in the deep end. So
Yeah,
here we go again.
Fantastic. I was going to ask this a little bit later, but you've brought up comfort zone. So I noticed on social media you mentioned how singing takes you out of your comfort zone. You never felt comfortable around that. What's going on with that? Can you explain that for me?
It's a really interesting thing because like I always kind of grew up with this like fantasy of like being a pop star or like performing, and that's always kind of been what I've fantasized doing. And then I kind of got into a dance background, and then I started music, and it was kind of like a joke. I wrote my first song, Leather Daddy, and I just happened to have a flatmate move in with me that was a music producer. I was like, hey, I have this kind of fun idea. Let's play around with it. And then obviously going into doing the vocals was really confronting for me because I was like, oh my God, this is something that I haven't done before. I can go on stage and dance and, that's fine. But the vocals thing has been definitely something that I've had to kind of like figure out along the way. And even still to today, like I will go into the studio and even around people that I know, it takes me a while to really feel comfortable in that space. And so this year, throwing myself into my art completely, it's something that I want to hone in and like, when you listen to my music, it's obviously like electronic music, so there doesn't need to be a lot of like vocal range and things like that. But I want to know that in the future, if I'm sitting down with other producers and things like that, I know what my vocal ability is, where my range sits. Therefore, like I can understand my music a little bit more, but be able to push myself a little bit more vocally as well and kind of see how that translates into my music. So taking on singing lessons this year was one of my big goals. And to really push myself outside my comfort zone again in that space and learn actually how to sing a proper song, like sing, not just kind of like talk sing, which is kind of what I do. So the goal is to learn the song that I'm working on and then potentially like sing an actual song at some point during this year, which scares the shit out of me. Honestly, it's so confronting, but that's more reason for me to kind of to do it.
You really are throwing stuff up into the air, aren't you?
Really?
It's a good place to be. I'm kind of curious. So you said that the music was almost a sideline, or you mentioned it a joke. But as you've gotten more into this, are you feeling like there's something about music that is touching you deeply now? That you
100%.
really, it started as a sideline, but now it's become the music itself is more important.
Totally. And that actually happened quite quickly. Like when I wrote Leather Daddy and then made that song, I remember like listening back to it and I sat there and I got goosebumps and I was like, holy shit, this was meant to be a joke. But I was like, this actually seems like this could be my reality. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do one song, I'm going to do a music video. And so the thing is that I'm over everything. So with the girls, with the live things, it's choreography. I do the hair, I do the makeup, I do the costuming. When I do video clips, I do all the directing. I come up with the scene shots, like my brain's very creative. And I remember I was doing the music video for Leather Daddy and it felt so natural. And it was the first time that I really, really was like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. This is feels so natural and so right to me, and there's nothing else. Obviously, I've had my business and things like that to navigate, but then it got to this year, and I was like, after the last 2 years of building and kind of building on the traction and building a little bit of a name for myself, I'm like, this year it's like all or nothing. So, whenever I'm on stage, it's the most I feel the most myself. So I'm just constantly reminded of the fact that there's no other choice for me but to do that.
It's a good realization to get to, and you're right. Remove the other distractions and give your whole attention to it. How would you describe, I suppose, your musical interests and maybe what's influenced you and where you might take your music? That's a lot of stuff to unpack, but
Yeah.
just give me a sense of that.
It's quite interesting because I suppose there's not really many other artists doing what I'm doing, kind of bringing that really live production element to electronic music. Like a lot of DJs will produce music, but they're standing behind decks. So I'm kind of like paving this lane that doesn't really exist at the moment or in New Zealand, which is just kind of like me navigating what that is like. And I think the interesting thing for me is people always ask me like what inspires you or who inspires you, and the answer is I inspire myself. So like a lot of my music comes from like my past experiences or happening in my life, or an EP that I've written that I want to produce later down the track is all about my sexual experiences. But a lot of it is stemmed from being a queer person in this kind of world. So obviously that translates a lot into my music, and that kind of queer element. Um, in terms of like other people that inspire me, I actually am like an R&B girl at heart. So I listen to so many different kinds of music, but I think the biggest thing for me is being as authentic as possible. And I think that's a part of my brand, is being very open and being very vulnerable, sharing my stories through electronic music, which interestingly enough, that those kind of music are kind of things you just dance to. You don't really listen to the lyrics, but adding in my queer experiences, it's been really interesting to see how that's really connected with people on a deeper level. And so I think also the biggest thing for me is to be inspired by things around me and other artists and other things like that, but don't be too distracted by that, because I want everything that comes from me to be really authentic and just from my core.
Yeah, so important. You've used the term queer a lot. How do you kind of identify yourself? I know that you explore a lot of stuff around femme. Do you see yourself as non-binary, gay, queer? How does that kind of...
I like my pronouns are he and him. I view myself as a man, and that's something growing up that I really struggled with, because always had this feminine side. So it was like people would be like, "Oh, you pussy, you're a this," and all of these kind of demeaning kind of femme words that were thrown on me. And so I suppose I started to believe that. But as I got older, it was like I've been a boxing instructor. I was the first openly gay male in New Zealand to have a boxing fight, and it really unlocked this masculine side of me that I always kind of had. And so for me, I just embrace every aspect of myself. That is very feminine. And on the opposite hand, like it's very masculine. That can be quite confusing for some people. I don't identify as non-binary. I definitely see myself as a man, but I'm a man that's not afraid to be emotional, to be vulnerable, be feminine, to wear heels if that's what I feel like. And so, for me, it is it's an expression, and my music is just an extension of that.
Yeah. Well, I was coming out almost 40 years ago,
Mm.
and at a time of law reform, and I've always been curious about this idea of, what's masculine, what's feminine, because I see, if a, cis male has emotions, that's to me is not feminine. Just as someone who is, say, lesbian or cis femme or whatever, if they're assertive, I don't see that as masculine. But
Mm.
society loves to create these barriers, doesn't it?
And these molds and societal molds of what is what and who is who. And, like for me, that is a really important part of what I do to try and break that down, And that always has been a big, big part of this for me is to break societal molds and get rid of that shit that's been thrown at us that is created. And also, I just want to say thank you, because if it wasn't for people like you 40 years ago, putting in the groundwork and going through all that you did, it makes me quite emotional because as a queer person standing here today, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if it wasn't for people like you. So I just want to thank you as well.
Well, thank you. And I look even further back. So people, when it was, I was coming out while law reform was happening in Parliament, but there were generations back where it was still illegal, where they were hassled, people beaten up, but people still stood up. So yeah, it's important to remember our history, isn't it?
100%.
Really, really important.
It is so important. And I think a lot of queer people or today kind of forget a little bit like that. Like when it comes to pride and stuff like that, it is a celebration. But for me, it really is a celebration of everyone that came before us, that paved the way for me to be able to do what I do now and to be able to stand on stage and feel safe in that place and be able to fully express myself in the way that I do, that was paved by generations before me.
Yeah. And you're also creating acceptance for people younger than you who are coming out as well and showing that you can live an authentic life. I did, if you don't mind, because obviously you live in the city, you go to clubs, so it's a very urban, probably quite liberal kind of thing. And I know that's not always the case across the country. And certainly growing up for you, it was Whanganui, wasn't it? You were born in. That was difficult. I know you've spoken about that before, but I suppose what's the biggest takeaway for you from the bullying, the exclusion, the stuff that you went through as a young person, not feeling you belong, and people not being comfortable and actually being nasty about you being queer? What would you? I guess what's your big learning, and what would you pass on to people about that?
I suppose like the biggest thing for me is like I've turned all of those negative things into my drive. And so, like those past experiences, I wouldn't change a thing because I think that in some way it kind of like unlocked this power in me that was like, it's not like I need to prove people wrong or anything like that. But I do believe that, all of those experiences have made me who I am today. And, I think the biggest thing is that if you are going through something like that and finding it hard, it's really hard when you're in it. But I can honestly say and promise that, there's going to be one day that you look back and you're actually going to be grateful for those experiences because they are going to shape you and they're going to inspire you in different ways and take those, and put them into your art because that's where people connect. And those are the things that really resonate with people because we've all gone through hardships, regardless of our sexuality. Bullying is something that happens to everyone, and a lot of people these days, especially with social media. So not even just queer people, but take those experiences, put them into your art, and be yourself because that's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. And I think when you get to that point where you don't hold on to it and you don't have any shame around those things actually become your power, and those are little gems and nuggets that make you who you are as a person.
We haven't talked about the show coming up, the Cross Street Music Festival, which is what the publicist wants us to talk about.
Yeah, we could talk for hours.
So just what are you bringing to Cross Street? What's your some of your old material, or you got something new?
I've got some new stuff. It's really exciting. This year has been as a really exciting one for me. So I obviously started off with myself, and then I had two girl dancers that were called the Vulvas, who are incredible. And then as I've gone into Auckland, I've picked up two male dancers, which adds this whole nother element to the show. My last show in Auckland I did with the girls and the boys. But it's really been fun to kind of explore. So Cross Street Festival, I'm bringing just the boys with me, which kind of creates this other kind of dynamic that I'm just exploring. And it's been really fun. Like those boys are incredible. Like one's dance for Blackpink, the other one for Mariah Carey. Like they're world class dancers.
Yeah.
They make me look good, which is which is good. And so Cross Street Festival, honestly, I went a few years ago when I lived in Auckland, and when I came, I wrote down a list of festivals that I wanted to get. And the thing for me is that I'm not a person that'll wait for opportunities. So I was like, this is the thing. Who runs Cross Street? Bam, put my name out there. Let's have a coffee. Like I'm gonna get in there. And so when I got on that lineup, I was like, oh my god, like what I put out there is coming to fruition. But I am I'm creating some new stuff. I want I quite like drama. So I want it to be quite dramatic. So I'm getting this kind of dramatic music piece that kind of opens it. I'm doing an unreleased song that hasn't been released that's coming up in my new EP. And I'm doing doing a more newer side of my music, and kind of piecing together actually a little show solely just for Cross Street Festival. Sometimes I'll kind of repeat the same set list, but this is a bit different. I want it to be a bit different and a bit fun, and obviously queer and camp.
Brilliant. Well, that sounds fantastic, and hopefully I'll be there. I live in the area. I live near K Road, so it's my hood. Yeah. But all the best, particularly as you've got your van. You're going on this new creative endeavor, focusing on the music. I'm sure it'll go well. And thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for your time. Honestly, I appreciate it, and I look forward to it. Hopefully, see you there.